to NTD China News. I'm Karen Chang. Making headlines this Wednesday, March 21st. The US and Japan talk about contingency plans in case of a Chinese attack on disputed islands. A massive cyber attack on South Korean banks has been traced to China, and Australians rally against China's state-sanctioned organ harvesting. The US may be promising Japan military support in the event of a Chinese invasion, and that isn't making China's leaders very happy. Are these talks between Japan and the US one step closer to peace, or is it a signal for impending war?
China's feeling the pressure after the US and Japan began operational planning today for what to do if armed conflict breaks out over disputed islands in the East China Sea. Commander of U.S. forces in the Asia-Pacific, Samuel Locklear, and Shigeru Iwasaka, head of Japan's Self-Defense Forces Joint Staff, are meeting in Hawaii today and tomorrow. China and Japan have been locked in conflict over the Diaoyu Islands, which are called Senkaku in Japan. The islands are under Japan's administrative authority based on a World War II treaty. They're believed to be sitting on vast oil reserves, and the Chinese regime has been asserting ownership claims. According to Japan's Kyodo newspaper, the US and Japan could launch a joint military action if China invades these islands. Since World War II, Japan has not maintained a standing army. The Japanese Defense Forces confines its activities to the Japanese islands and has only engaged in non-combat missions overseas. The talks with Japan comes as the US engages in a security pivot from the Middle East to the Asia-Pacific region. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Hong Li said China is, quote, extremely concerned by the reports. The Chinese regime has objected to foreign mediation on the island dispute and bucks what Mr. Hong calls outside pressure. The U.S. has taken no stance on which side the islands belong.
China has been blamed by U.S. cybersecurity experts for hacking other countries' computers. But so far, experts say the attacks are mostly to gather information. A cyber attack that took down South Korean computers yesterday has been traced back to China, but South Korea believes there could be another culprit.
A coordinated cyber attack that downed several businesses in South Korea has been traced to China. The attacks temporarily paralyzed 3 South Korean banks and 3 broadcasters on Wednesday. One bank estimated that 32,000 computers were affected. Hackers used a vicious code that kept the networks down till early Thursday morning. China denies that it was behind the attacks, saying Internet protocol or IP addresses can be misleading. One official in South Korea blamed the attacks on North Korea, which has attacked South Korean computers before. While it would take months to prove North Korea's involvement, recent threats from Pyongyang have made it a strong suspect. North Korea has threatened to end a 60-year armistice with South Korea over its joint military exercises with the United States. The rogue regime has been chafing under US-led sanctions, punishing it for conducting its 3rd nuclear test in February. North Korean media blamed the US and South Korea for cyber warfare on its own computers last week. Observers speculate that Wednesday's attacks were a retaliation by Pyongyang, who has used Chinese IP addresses in the past.
The U.S. has pushed the Chinese regime to acknowledge cyber attacks aimed at hurting American firms. One U.S. official reported that Treasury Secretary Jack Lew had pressed the point during his meeting with Chinese Premier Li Keqiang on Wednesday. Lew distinguished between cyber attacks from rogue attackers and those from China aimed at stealing trade secrets. Lew told reporters after the meeting that Chinese attacks are, quote, very serious threats to the economic interests of the U.S. On Tuesday, U.S. internet security company Mandiant testified before a Senate committee about the volume of trade cyber espionage linked to the Chinese military. The Chinese regime has denied the accusations, claiming itself is the target of cyber attacks. And in Australia, practitioners of the Chinese meditation practice Falun Gong gathered outside Parliament House to raise awareness about forced organ harvesting under the Chinese regime. Our local bureau has a report.
The responsibility of every country.
The local Falun Gong community from all over Australia gathered on Wednesday for a rally in Canberra, the country's seat of government.
From Melbourne, it took me 10 hours to get here, but I think it's a very worthwhile journey for me.
They are voicing their concerns about state-sanctioned organ harvesting and transplant abuses in China.
Organ harvesting, actually, it's unacceptable by human beings. So these sort of things we need to stop as soon as possible.
Inside Parliament, former Canadian Secretary of State to Asia Pacific David Kilgour raised the issue with lawmakers in a private forum.
We certainly suggested to them this morning that the Parliament of Australia should be passing legislation too on this issue, all kinds of legislation.
Recently, a New South Wales Member of Parliament proposed a bill to criminalise organ tourism, where obtaining an organ through illicit means would be equivalent to manslaughter.
We would hope that it'll make people think twice before they go overseas and take an organ from someone who hasn't voluntarily donated it, or an organ from someone who might have been almost killed to order by an unethical regime.
This potential bill is a significant step forward, according to Falun Gong practitioners, who recently collected over 30,000 signatures from concerned Australians.
Yeah, the response is very warm, and so many kind-hearted Australian people, and they're willing to sign a petition. That's why in the short period we can have so many signatures.
This is part of a worldwide push from Falun Gong, who in late 2012 got 166,000 people across 36 European countries to sign a similar petition that was later delivered to the United Nations. According to independent investigators, Falun Gong practitioners make up a large portion of the Chinese regime's illegal organ pool for their forced organ harvesting scheme. It also includes other prisoners of conscience like Tibetans, Uyghurs and House Christians. NTD Canberra, Australia.
And still ahead on NTD China news, another attempt by US lawmakers to pressure China's yuan valuation policy. China's solar panel giant Suntech declares bankruptcy, and meet the master of Bruce Lee, the latest film about Ip Man. And welcome back. US lawmakers are making a renewed attempt to push through legislation on China's currency. They say the low value of the yuan is hurting US businesses. During his visit to China, US Treasury Secretary Jack Lew raised the issue of the valuation of the yuan with Chinese leaders, urging them to allow the currency to follow market demand. On Wednesday, a bill to press China to change its currency policy was introduced to the US House of Representatives. It's similar to bills proposed in 2010 and 2011 that eventually failed to get the final congressional approval. The latest version is co-sponsored by 101 House lawmakers. It would allow US companies to seek countervailing duties against Chinese goods to offset exchange rate disadvantages. The yuan has risen 16% in value against the US dollar since 2010, but critics of China's currency policy say the yuan is kept at an artificially low level to allow Chinese exporters to sell their goods cheaper overseas. Jack Lew said after his two-day trip to Beijing that Chinese leaders acknowledged that a market-determined yuan would be in the best interest of both countries. China is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It also receives millions of dollars in foreign aid because of its status as a developing country. And after heavy criticism, Canada is cutting the amount of foreign aid they'll be sending, but that might just hurt the people in China who need the aid most.
The Canadian government is cutting direct aid to China. The Canadian International Development Agency, or CIDA, is slashing $377 million in aid to China and 13 other countries. The cuts will take effect by 2015. It's part of an effort by the CIDA to utilize aid more efficiently while working with the private sector. China is the world's second largest economy and has seen rapid growth and prosperity in the past decade. That's why many are criticizing developed nations who are sending charity money to China. And while one look at Shanghai's skyline brings into question China's need for foreign aid, the rural area of China paints a very different picture. And this is where the CIDA says the money is needed most. Between 2010 and 2011, Canada gave China almost $30 million in aid. But with China's new superpower status, the days of foreign aid may be drawing to a close.
The world's largest solar panel manufacturer, Suntech, has declared bankruptcy for its major subsidiary. Wuxi Suntech failed to make a debt payment last Friday. Today, a court in Wuxi near Shanghai made the bankruptcy ruling. 8 creditor banks had filed for its insolvency on Monday. Chinese state-run media reports that Suntech owed debt totaling $1.14 billion as of February. The company defaulted on a $541 million bond payment on March 15th. It had deferred payment for 60% of its creditors to May, but still did not pay the remaining 40%. Wuxi Suntech is a subsidiary of New York-based Suntech Power Holdings. It was Suntech's largest manufacturing plant, supplying 95% of its products. Suntech is planning to close its only U.S. manufacturing plant to save money. It has been notified by the New York Stock Exchange that it could be delisted in 6 months. Hailstorms with hail the size of eggs have struck southern China. The storm with wind gusts of more than 100 miles per hour have left a trail of destruction in the province of Guangdong.
An unusual tornado and hailstorm has killed 24 people in southern China's Guangdong province. Local officials say 272 people were injured, with 158 of them hospitalized. The wild combination of thunderstorm, hail, and a tornado hit the region with gusting winds of 110 miles an hour. Hailstone the size of golf balls and eggs smashed windshields. Dongguan city officials says this was the strongest tornado to hit the city since record-keeping began. State-run Xinhua news agency reports more than 200,000 people have been forced to relocate. The massive storm comes just 1 week after the region was hit by another thunder and hailstorm. Property losses are still being assessed.
Ip Man is widely known to kung fu enthusiasts as the master of Bruce Lee. Several films have been made about the martial arts grandmaster. Next, we go to Hong Kong to meet the star who played the leading role in the newest film about Ip Man and find out why this film is different to the rest.
New kung fu movie Ip Man: The Final Fight kicked off the 37th Hong Kong International Film Festival. The film follows Ip Man's later years in Hong Kong. The Wing Chun Kung Fu master is best known in the West for being the teacher of Bruce Lee. This time around, Anthony Wong plays the role of the older Ip Man. Wing Chun Grandmaster and son of Ip Man, Ip Jun, says that Wong was the best choice for the role.
The spirit and lifestyle he had in those years can all be observed in Anthony Wong's performance. It seems everything is captured. That is my biggest feeling.
Ip Jun's disciple Jack Lew produced the movie. He's worked on previous Ip Man films and says the latest installment should appeal to both the old and the young.
This movie will definitely resonate with the older viewers, and the younger viewers will be able to understand how hard the older generation's life was through watching this movie.
Capturing the spirit of the time period.
People of that period were more cultured and elegant, not like the disgusting ugliness of modern youngsters.
Because the movie is based on the story of Ip Man in his later years, reviews of the film say there are fewer scenes of conflicts. Instead, the themes of humility and cultural values dominate. This style may be unexpected with a Western audience, but critics say the movie should still do well in Asia. Hong Kong-based actress and film festival ambassador Miriam Yeung says it's the message behind a kung fu movie that is more important than the action.
Actually, I feel that all kung fu movies, apart from the fighting, there is a spirit behind them. The story of Master Ip Man has been done many times, always expressing Chinese people's unity or certain principles. It isn't just kicking and punching.
She looks forward to watching Anthony Wong's performance and says she intends to send her children to study kung fu. Ip Man: The Final Fight will go on general release in Hong Kong on March 28th.
And that's all for this broadcast of NTD China News. For more about China-related content, visit our website at ntd.tv or subscribe to our YouTube channel NTD on China. Coming up next is China Focus with Shali Zhang. She speaks with Bob Diaz from the Committee to Protect Journalists about how the landscape of information has changed in China. Stay tuned.